I often hear that planting trees is an environmentally friendly action, but this is barely scratching the surface. Trees provide breathable air, food, shelter, timber, medicine, and beauty. Without trees, we could not live. Trees have a healing power for people, for all livelihood, and for nature at large. So for many of us, nature has been pushed out of our life. Now we are paying a heavy price. Loss of biodiversity, climate change, global zoonotic diseases. We are not talking about the environment, but we are talking about the future of humanity. I am thrilled today to host a fantastic panel of very inspirational leaders who have been acting and raising awareness about regenerating our planets. Over the next 90 minutes, we will walk in the Amazon. We will learn more about the Great Green Wall to fight desertification in the Sahel. And we will share a number of ideas with three main objectives: to inform, to inspire, and to support projects on the ground. As a first guest, I am thrilled to welcome Stéphane Hallaire, who is here with me in the studio, and Nicole Schwab, who is joining us from Geneva. Stéphane, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Nicole. Good to see you online. So I'm going to start with Stéphane here, and I would like to quote you to start. So you said, "Forest is the best solution to meet two major challenges of the future of humanity: climate change and the loss of biodiversity. It is also a fantastic ally in bringing our lifestyles into harmony with the living, in particular through the circular bioeconomy and the emotional reconnection with nature to which we belong." So you created Reforestation about 10 years ago to address citizens and businesses with a concrete, positive and measurable solution in the service of Earth through participatory reforestation. So as far as I understand, you bring together about 200,000 citizens, over 700 project owners, and you work across the 5 continents in over 30 countries. So the first question I would like to ask you, if citizens, corporate organizations, and governments come together to plant and grow forests, do you think we can avoid a 6th mass extinction and find solutions against climate change?
Of course I do. I do because I strongly believe that what we're facing is just a matter of will, and that's it. We've got the know-how. It's not too late. Nature can recover. We need to push in the right direction. And what I witness today is that there is a momentum. There is a momentum of institutions, companies, individuals, and we know, all of us, that it's time for action, and we need to stop talking and start acting. And as you said, I created Reforest'Action 11 years ago, and it was very difficult times at the beginning. Nobody was talking about forests, and not even reforestation. And today, everybody agrees that beyond CO2 reduction, or the reduction of our CO2 emissions, forests play a key role on climate, but also on biodiversity. So yes, I strongly believe that we can avoid it. It's late, but it's not too late.
Thank you for this first message of hope. I just have a follow-up question before turning to Nicole. In one of our previous conversations, you very much insisted on not only the importance of those eco-entrepreneurs, but also the importance of building a whole ecosystem and building value chains to give an economic benefit to local communities so as they could increase their reforestation action. Can you elaborate a bit more on this approach?
Yes, in the what we call the developing countries, forests are a key driver for to create wellness for the local populations. And actually the social benefits are the main drivers for the project. We need to start from the local people. And if they create forest, if they restore forest, if they plant trees, it's for their benefit beforehand. And then we can make sure that the project will deliver environmental benefits. The best way to ensure that the project will deliver social benefits is to make sure that there is a value chain. Because when you plant a tree, it has a benefit on climate and biodiversity, as we said, but it's the fruits that will be delivered, or the wood that will create, will improve people's living conditions. But people need to have a value chain to make sure that it delivers social benefits. So what we like doing at Reforest'Action is to start from the entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs, because they control and they know the value chain, and they can drive the reforestation projects to make sure that it goes in the right direction in terms of value chain. We've got a set of criteria which put the focus on the environmental benefits. So the value chain doesn't come against the environmental benefits. It comes in addition to them. But starting from the value chain is probably the best way to implement and to scale projects in developing countries.
Thank you. Nicole, I would like to turn to you. So you're heading the nature-based solutions platform of the World Economic Forum. You're also involved as advisor and facilitator to a number of NGOs working in environment and well-being. And nature has been very core of your commitments and of your life over the past years. So my first question to you is about the role of international coalitions, such as those that the World Economic Forum catalyzes, just to build on what Stéphane was saying about the importance of value chain. So how do you see the role of those coalitions?
Thank you, Diane. So I think that the scale of the problem we're facing today is really too great for any actor to be able to address alone. And that's why we need these coalitions that cut across the private sector, the public sector, grassroots organizations, the entrepreneurs or ecopreneurs that Stéphane mentioned. And so with 1T.org, the Trillion Trees platform of the World Economic Forum, we've been working to provide such a platform to bring together these different actors and to raise ambition for this vision of conserving, restoring, and growing 1 trillion trees over the next decade. And I agree with Stéphane that it's not too late, but we really have to acknowledge the urgency and the scale of what we're facing. At least 1/4 of all the tree species that are being assessed globally at the moment by the Global Tree Assessment are threatened with extinction. So when we talk about biodiversity, when we talk about the threats that we're facing, we have to understand that this is also affecting trees, and there's this vicious cycle with climate change and loss of biodiversity, which is affecting all of the ecosystem services that we depend on, whether it's water or topsoil or the air we breathe. So yes, I think these coalitions are essential. I think the private sector has a huge role to play in this regard as well.
Thank you. So actually, maybe you want to comment a little bit more on the importance of the private sector, because for the time being, we see a lot of international organizations, corporate organizations, being involved in the reforestation efforts, mostly from CSR policies or through grant funding, which is great, but probably not enough considering the scale of the challenge. So do you see any of those corporate organizations that are joining this 1 trillion trees campaign or around the platform you're directing, corporate organizations who actually try to shift their business model towards including more of protection of biodiversity into the core business?
Yes, I think that's a very important point. And there's more and more companies that are coming forward and committing to forest conservation or forest restoration. And I agree with you that initially it may have come more from a CSR angle or more at a smaller scale, but more and more we're seeing these massive commitments from companies like Microsoft or Salesforce or Amazon or many others, MasterCard. And in this case, there are different drivers that are leading the private sector to start to look at investing in forests as a business case, because there really is a business case there. And there are 3 angles for the private sector to look at this. The first one is to increase business resilience, because we know that a lot of companies are directly dependent on these value chains that Stéphane mentioned, on some commodities that either are sourced directly from forests or depend on healthy ecosystems. And we know that trees are essential to healthy ecosystems. So whether it's direct or indirect, there's really a supply risk that companies are starting to recognize and starting to see that they need healthy forests, healthy ecosystems, and to invest in that to ensure that they will be able to continue sourcing the products that they rely upon. On the other side, there's demand risk. Consumers are starting to demand something different from the companies. We are starting to want products that are sourced responsibly. We're starting to want companies that are taking care of the environment that we live in. And so this is also at the core of this risk, I would say, and resiliency angle, in addition, of course, to regulatory risks, as more and more countries are putting in place regulations not only on climate, but also around nature and some of these, this is going to be coming more and more. So that's one area that we're seeing more and more companies really start to look at very seriously. And another area I would say is around actually new business opportunities, and that's what you touched upon. And this is maybe more kind of at the forefront, right? But can we start to shift business models to regenerative business models? So business models that are looking at some of these value chains, but in a way that is responsible, in a way that respects local communities, as Stéphane said, that respects biodiversity, and that really looks at this in an integral manner and sees the opportunity in that. And I'm just going to give you an example. We released a report at the World Economic Forum, the New Nature Economy Report Series, that showed that if we are going to transition to an economy that is nature positive, that therefore that does no longer depletes nature, but that actually starts to regenerate nature, this could actually create tremendous value and tremendous amounts of jobs. So it's really starting to shift our mindset more than anything, because as Stéphane said, it's possible, we have all the tools, we have the know-how, but we've been kind of addicted to this model that is just looking at nature and whether it's trees, but I would look at trees as kind of a symbol of the broader services, as something we can just keep on depleting, and we just have to stop and we have to shift this mindset. And actually there is a really positive path forward, and it's possible, but we need the courage to make this shift now.
Stéphane, do you see also this change happening like over the past 10 years of your involvement? Have you seen an evolution in the way corporate organizations approach you about reforestation?
Yes, we've been working with more than 2,000 companies for the last 10 years. And yes, we see a shift. Companies start to consider forest as part of their business model. And which is very important, because until a couple of years ago, it was kind of we use forest to communicate because there is an emotional value in the trees and the forest. But it's still the case for some companies. But the companies that engage to a large extent, they include the forest into their business model. And they start considering, as Nicole said, they start considering, how can I restore the environment to sustain my business and to answer a question from my customers saying, well, what do you do for the environment? So we have an approach where we go from the business model of the company, and then we extend. So companies that are very that rely on natural product, we include forest and agroforestry within their fields and their area of investment. But then we extend to areas where they've got customers, they've got stakeholders, so they can share their project with their stakeholders. So it's not only their project, but it's a common project. And finally, we go to the next step, which is restoring forests where forests are the most damaged, where there is a strong need for restoration. But having this three-step approach makes sure that whatever we do for the forest is linked to the business model. And the companies start thinking, okay, can my business restore the environment as opposed to destroy the environment on a daily basis? So you can turn up at work every morning and say, okay, good, today I will restore the environment.
And there's a business case for it for the first or maybe the second circle that you were mentioning, maybe not for the third one, where a company may agree to lose money or to fund something that is not profitable, but you're saying it's fine for them because they can see an interest.
For some of them it's fine.
Yeah.
For others, no, it's not. It depends on the manager, basically, how strong he believes in this scenario. It's the beginning of this new story. We see the shift happening, but it's only the beginning. The biggest challenge we face at Reforest'Action is that small projects don't have a business case, right? And they are so important. They are the starting point. So we need to find companies that are happy to help this project with no return on investment at all. And then we can move to bigger projects where there is potential return on investment with high risk, with long timelines, but still they're more in line with what they're used to. But we need companies to invest without expecting return on investment in the short term in the first place.
Okay, so financial returns should not be the only lens through which
no, not for the time being.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Something that you briefly touched upon earlier was, that the fact that reforestation had become kind of like a new hype. So like companies are, willing to, announce like enormous numbers of trees planted without necessarily a concern for the ecosystems and for the type of species. So how do you avoid trees against biodiversity?
By talking about forests, not trees. By talking about the ecosystem and not the individuals. Because once you start talking about forests, then you start exploring the complexity of the ecosystem and the interactions. So you realize that you need different types of trees. You need to be careful about what you do because you don't understand how the forest works deeply, right? So the more you act, the riskier it is. So you have a care, you take care about the forest, you protect the forest before acting. So, with the companies we work with, we talk about hectares, no longer trees. And it's a small shift in the wording, but it's a huge shift in the way you look at things.
And Nicole, in the coalitions that you're organizing, do you also see a similar interest of corporate organizations in trying to understand the natural ecosystems and not only going after like as many actors they can restore as possible?
Well, I think as Stéphane said, it's just the beginning, right? And there's some companies that are already quite sophisticated in their understanding of restoration and reforestation, and others are starting to be interested and to be willing to do something. but I would say that the level of knowledge is not quite there yet. So we're trying to provide that by bringing in experts, and there's a number of standards, and there's more and more that's being developed in this space to make sure that, as Stéphane said, we're not looking at individual trees and planting as many of them, but we're actually looking at ecosystems. How do we restore forest ecosystems? What does that really take? What does it mean? And it's a very complex process, as Stéphane said. And I think another thing that we're observing, which is also important, is a lot of companies are kind of pushing towards low priced trees, right? Because then you get more trees for the same amount of money invested. And I think that can be very risky because in some cases we know that to ensure survival rates and depending on the ecosystem, the geography, the country, the climate, there's going to be very different conditions. And so our encouragement is also just for companies more to look at what do they want to achieve, which area do they want to invest in based upon where they're based and their different angle for looking at this. And then what does that actually require, rather than coming at it more from, okay, how can I plant as many trees as possible? And I think, there's of course still some work to be done in this space, but it's very good that there is so much interest because we really need that. And now we can start to work to make sure that this interest is channeled in the right way for the right trees in the right places and actually for the forest landscapes and not the trees.
Of course. I just have maybe questions for actually the two of you. More and more businesses are aware, conscious, and willing to move forward rather quickly. Do you think this is something to be hopeful about, to bring about a radical change in capitalism, in the sense that those corporate organizations would account for the service of natural ecosystems in their performance? Is it something that we're any near to see in the future?
Okay, Nicole, go
on. I think it's the beginning, and I think this is not just the responsibility of the private sector. I think the public sector has a huge role to play there, also with regulation and incentives. I mean, there's a lot of work there that can be done to help this process. In terms of funding, as Stéphane said, it's also, I think it's all different types of capital and different actors of society. But I am hopeful that at least there is a much greater awareness than there was, and there's more and more interest and studies on the value of, how can we start to include natural capital in our economic system. So we're not there yet, but at least we've taken a first step.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a challenging subject, this one. Can we put a price on nature? Which is very often the way we look at it. The way I look at it is that when you act for forests, it's a good way to shift our economy to a bioeconomy based on nature, because the more you restore forest with a value chain in mind, the more you enter in a positive cycle where you say, okay, I want to restore, and I want it to be positive for the economy, and the better it is for the economy, the better it is for the ecosystem. So forest can be used as a way to offset an old way of doing things, but it can also be used to accelerate the shift to a new way of doing things.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to the two of you for this hopeful message about how the tide is actually shifting towards a good direction. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you here. And I'm now ready to welcome Pieter. Pieter, who has just joined us online. Hi, Pieter.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I have a first very simple question for you. So you are Chief Tree Planting Officer, yet your company is a search engine. Can you explain us how a search engine company can actually plant trees?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, Ecosia is a search engine, but we are the search engine that plants trees. When we were founded in 2009, our founder thought, deforestation is really a big problem. We really need to restore nature. How do we do this? Where do we get the resources to do that? And that was the moment that he thought, hey, the internet search engine market. That's really where a lot of money is pumped around at the moment. If I could just get a little bit of that market and I use that to plant trees and restore nature, I could probably have a very big effect. So he really set up the search engine because he saw it as the biggest opportunity to raise money for restoration. And this is how these two would be connected. If it was maybe another technology or something where we would see this opportunity, we might have been a very different company. So we are really both. So we have strong teams and people working on making this a good search engine, but we're also a reforestation company that has a search engine, and we're not just a search engine that plants trees. So we have a tree team that I'm heading, many partners on the ground with which we're working, and the impact is really on both sides.
Okay, so Ecosia has a presence in over 25 countries, and you, in one of our previous conversations, you very much insisted on the importance not only of the technical part of planting trees, which is like often seen as a technical challenge, but also the importance of the socioeconomics, like how to design projects, engage local communities, monitor the projects. Can you expand a little bit more on your role exactly in that regard?
Yes. So the ideal situation is actually the other way around, and that is not that your project engages local communities, but that local communities engage us in their project, so that they have the drive to change something and that we can help with our resources to make that possible. And why is that so important? Because that is a signal that that community, the people that live there, actually have a vision about the change they want to make. Keep in mind that trees, we have, as Nicole said, we have around 60,000 tree species that we know, and they really grow on many places on this planet. And if you bring humanity out of the equation, trees grow back in many, many places because they are adapted to all the circumstances. Not maybe in the desert and maybe not on the Arctics because it's too cold or too hot, but for the rest, most places will have some trees. And that shows you that there is a reason why these trees are not growing back at the moment. And that is because they're very often suppressed from growing back because of overgrazing, because of changing land into agriculture and keeping the trees down, because there are cities, there's infrastructure. So in many places, the restoration power of nature is actually very strong, but it's being suppressed. And that shows that tree planting and restoration is most of all a socioeconomic question. So you have to change, you have to understand the socio-economic situation in which you're working. And only if you figure out that, if you understand the motivations of people, how they use their land, how they can maybe change some of their practices to do grazing in a different way or use cut and carry systems where they bring the food to the cow instead of the cow to the grass. If you understand that you can work on solutions there, then you can actually make a sustainable project. And yes, then you have the technical questions. Where do I get my seeds? Will I build a nursery? Do I do seed balls? Will I do direct seeding? Where do I get my water? How do I have to maintain them? So the technicalities are also really important. And for native forests and native trees bringing back, we are also lacking a lot of knowledge and we have to bring it back. But for a successful long-term project, you need to understand the socioeconomic reality in which you're working and you need to solve the technical challenge. And only if you do both, you can make a successful restoration project. But that also shows why we cannot just make a map of the world and say, look how many trees we could potentially grow. Because then you're forgetting that at all of these places, there's probably also a reason why the trees are not growing today. So you have to work on the ground to figure that out first.
Okay. You also mentioned that every tree is not a business case. So we were talking earlier with Stéphane that the importance of value chain and of giving economic benefit to local communities, but you also need to be ready to lose money if you want to have an actual impact on restoring degraded lands. So what drives actually your decisions to support a project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's almost obvious. Huh? So if you would look at trees as a business case, or if you only look at land use as a business case that has to earn itself back, well, then you get the world that we have today. Then markets and actors going to search for possibilities to make money from the soil. And very often, unfortunately, it means there's no room for trees. And it very often, unfortunately, means trees will not be part of the business model and of the plan. And I totally agree with what Nicole and Stéphane said on that companies are shifting. So there is, I definitely see this positive trend as well. But of course, many of the places, netto every year, we're losing many more trees than we're gaining trees because they are suppressed and they're cut down. So we have to make the very conscious decision that we are willing to invest in planting trees, where the return that we will get is trees and biodiversity, but not money. And that is completely fine, because money was created by humans to serve humans, and we are not created to serve money. We should use it what is best for us and for our planet and for our children. And it is one of these questions that I think we all start to ask ourselves is, what did we do to make this world a better place? We talked earlier, it was mentioned about the regenerative companies that are now starting to position themselves like that. I think it's super relevant that companies no longer see themselves as a vehicle to make money, but as a vehicle that can contribute to the better of the world. And then have entrepreneurs thinking about how they can do that. And I think Ecosia is an example of it. We started from the question, what can we do for the world, instead of what can we do to make a lot of money? And if you start to connect it, powerful things are possible. But we will have to accept that of the 60,000 tree species, of which indeed 25% are endangered or vulnerable or critically endangered, it is a decision for us to save them, and it will cost money, and it will not pay itself back financially. But it's very much worth it, and we should do it. And this is really a shift in mindset that is needed.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying is fascinating, especially because you're one of the very few actors in this field that gets money from the private sector, and not from government grants. So do you see an evolution in like how to attract financial partners in this field of reforestation, so that it's not only limited to public aids, that is by definition limited, but more taps into some private money, like what you're doing with Ecosia?
Yeah, I think what Stéphane said is I very much agree with. And, it really depends on the company. So some are ready to make this shift. It's almost, there are those that just look at what is the law that I have to comply with, and within that I do my business, and we're good, and I'm not going to do voluntarily something good for the planet. The lawmakers should take care of that and restrict me if they want. And then there's the one who go now a step further and say, well, but we do feel we have this corporate social responsibility to have a kind of net zero impact. So we're going to offset our emissions, or we're going to work in our supply chains, which of course for companies is incredibly important. That is where they have their biggest lever. And then there's the ones that say, well, we want to go beyond that. But this is still a small fraction. I think indeed, if you would put all the money together that is really put into restoration in a altruistic way from a company's perspective, of course, we're not talking billions yet. Yeah? We're talking maybe 30, 40 million at the moment a year, which is definitely not enough. So we need a much bigger change in mindset if we want to change it. See it as a voluntary tax to save the planet. You can say, I don't want to pay taxes. I only pay taxes if the government wants me to pay taxes. But we shouldn't wait for the governments to figure it all out for us. Some of them are doing a great job, others are too slow. We all have our own responsibility as companies as well. Actually, yesterday, a judge in the Netherlands, there was a great case against Shell, the oil company, and Shell was forced by the judge to reduce its emissions till 2030 by 45%. And Shell said, well, but that's not to us, that's the lawmakers who should do that. And the judge said, no, it's your responsibility as a company to make sure you keep our planet livable. And I think that is the new mindset that we have to think about. We shouldn't just wait for others to guide us and tell us what to do. We should proactively take action and ask ourselves, what do we need to do to help this planet?
So yeah, it's actually very interesting. I would like to build up on what you were just saying. about the importance of raising the awareness from the general public. So you are very strong on social media. Your search engine is used by, I think, over 15 million people. Social media, you probably have like 1 million people following you. How do you think that changing the mindset of the general public can actually help having an impact on the ground?
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, this is also something that I'm very happy with and incredibly proud about, that we have these 15 million users that use us as a search engine because they want to contribute and they see that this is a way to, in a very simple way, contribute to a better cause. These are also very young people. We have the youngest user base of search engines, all people that are really concerned about their future, and they are our users and they want to do something. We have great interactions with them in our social media channels, and I just feel like one of the little things that is in this whole mechanism that is Ecosia, with our users at the one hand, with the search engine in the middle, and then with all our projects at the other side. And what I think is incredibly important, particularly if we talk about the users of our search engine in Germany or in Spain or France or in the UK or the US, is that we help them to reconnect to the world. And what I mean with that is that we teach them as well what the impact of the way how they consume, what that impact actually is on the world. Because of course, it's very much detached. It's hard to imagine that if you buy something in your local shop, it actually has an impact somewhere far away on forests. But it's a fun exercise to do. Almost everything that you use in your daily life will have a positive, neutral, or negative impact on trees. It's an exercise I do a lot at home. I simply pick something. Here, I'm making notes on this paper. Well, that obviously has an impact of trees. It's made of paper. I have my earpods here, who are obviously having some mined metals in there, which probably was not very positive for nature. So all of the things are influencing our world. And as Ecosia, we're teaching our users about that. So we're showing that they're part of this world and not outside of it. And at the same time, we are connecting them with our projects on the ground. So we show them, how is our Ethiopian partner group in Ethiopia in their huts? How are they living there? What drives the guys in Peru every day? What are the biggest concerns of our partner in Indonesia, and how is the community doing there? So we are also a platform to connect these two worlds. And that is, I think, a side effect that we never thought about, but that I think that is really, really powerful. And I think that's a very powerful part of Ecosia, is to connect people in the world and to give them an insight into each other's houses and reality.
Okay. Well, Pieter, thank you very much for all the hard work and the inspiration, and best of luck for your projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So our next speaker that I'm thrilled to welcome is actually based in the Amazon right now. Julio, I hope the connection is good enough and we can see you. So you, just as a very short introduction, so you've worked with sustainable entrepreneurs in Latin America and Asia. You're advising international organizations and governments on biodiversity, and you've been particularly involved in the conservation of the Amazon, where you decided to move. So I understand you're based in Florencia in Colombia, and you wanted to take us through the forest school, that you recently built, that both teaches local communities about sustainable enterprise and engage urban entrepreneurs to get to know more about the Amazon. So I think you wanted to take us on a tour, and we would love to follow your steps. Julio, I don't know if you're still connected.
The conversation. Deforestation is the consequence.
We cannot see you and we can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, more or less. And we would love to see you because we would like to go on a tour with you in the Amazon. Now there is no image, no sound. We can try and hopefully you can reconnect and share with the audience this wonderful project, which is a forest school. So I can maybe waiting for you to connect back to say a few words of what I understand what it was basically your objective is to get people living in urban areas in Colombia working in business and finance to come to the Amazon for a few days and try to understand about the forest and have them somehow inspired so that they could make action both on the business side but also on the finance side. And I understand you're also working with local communities to restore certain traditions and help them move towards social enterprise. So I really hope we can hear directly from you to share more about your work.
I'm back.
You're back?
I'm back. So I'm in the rainforest, so it is starting raining, so be patient with me, please. But what I wanted to say is that I'm very happy to join this conversation, which I fully agree. Here in Colombia, we have more or less 6% of the whole Amazon rainforest ecosystem. And well, for me, deforestation is not the problem. Deforestation is the consequence. The real problem is the lack of connection that we, Colombian citizens, have dedicated to this region. And therefore, we lose more or less 150,000 hectares of forest every year. And I had the opportunity, Diane, to walk throughout the Amazon rainforest. It was more or less 400 kilometers in 2018. And I got to know the local communities, their needs, their sufferings, why they were deforesting, why they were removing forests and putting pastures on the field. And what I found was many things. For instance, I saw many women suffering violence in their homes. I saw many young people wanting to leave the region, wanting to go to Bogota or to Medellin. And when I am from Bogota, actually, and when I was discussing this with my colleagues, with my friends, so I found out that there was very little knowledge about the Amazon rainforest. And for me, that's the main problem. We cannot protect what we don't care about, and we cannot care about what we don't know. That's why we decided to come here to the golden door of the Amazon rainforest, which is Florencia, to start up a forest school. This is the first forest school in the country, which is creating connections between citizens, private enterprises, investors, local communities, and we are very happy because now, time by time, people are getting more connected, and this big wheel, which we are not inventing, but which we are trying to push forward, is moving slowly, but it is moving. So I am very happy to share with you this experience, to share with you the people I'm working with. For instance, this guy you see here right now, he's called the Bee Man, Felipe the Bee Man. on his joining this cause, because he taught me something very valuable, which was already said, that if we want to restore the forest, we need to look at the trees, yes, but we also need to look at the bees. And Felipe, how are you doing? ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, Julio.
Excelente. Felipe, show us a little bit about the stingless bees, the native bees here in the Amazon rainforest. Thank you, Felipe. What do you have to say about this sanctuary of stingless bees? ¿Qué tienes que decir sobre este trabajo con las abejas?
Aquí en esta colmena tenemos 4,000 abejas, Julio.
4,000 abejas. So in this hive, there are almost 4,000 bees. And if you multiply 4,000 bees by 150,000 hectares of forest that are being removed every single year, so you can do simple mathematics and you can get to the conclusion that we are losing almost 900 million bees every year. And bees, it is not a secret, bees are the main pollinizers of the forest, and therefore we need to protect them. We are doing it together with the bee man Felipe, and this is a great story to tell to the peasants, to the women we are working with, so that we can create sustainable business, so that we all can create reasons to protect the forest and reasons to restore the forest. That's what we are doing, Diane. So that's what we are doing here in the Amazonia Emprende, the Forest School.
So you were mentioning the fact that you were supporting local entrepreneurs to grow their business in a more sustainable way. So how do you help them? And are you, if I understand correctly, you're trying to help also support the value chain so that the products produced locally can be sold in the country and maybe one day internationally as well.
Of course. We operate here as an incubator center, incubator of green businesses. Nowadays, we have 4 businesses which we are incubating. The first one is this one with Felipe, the bee man, el abejero. The second one is the construction of mega nurseries so that the local communities can profit of the compensation measures that private industries are doing here in the territory. We have another one on sustainable nature tourism, the local communities, and one very, very fantastic project on sustainable gastronomy. For instance, if you look at this in the Forest School, we are combining trees with cacao, with cocona, with arasa, with acai, with camu camu, all fantastic fruits, native fruits, which combine very, very, very well in this ecosystem. I really liked when you said that it is not about trees, it is about hectares, but we have to move beyond the hectares. It is about dignity, it is about lifestyles, it is about people, women who have the power in their
I think we lost the connection again, which is very unfortunate as we walking around the rainforest. So you were saying your effort was not only about trees, but about the ecosystems and about lifestyles and dignity of the people, and bringing social and economic development to those local communities as well. I don't know if you can still hear us. I would add actually to what you were just saying that it's also about inspiring the general public, us, you know, sitting here in various places of the world to know more about those local products and to contribute to change mindsets, as what we've discussed on this panel already. I'm going to wait a few more seconds to see if the connection will be back on. Julio, I'm afraid we lost you. Well, I think we lost Julio for a second, but maybe I actually take the opportunity to turn to Stéphane, since you're sitting here with me. You were talking about value chains, and Julio was just sharing how important is it to try and support those local products. Is it something that you're also trying to do? I mean, how do you react to what he was saying?
Yes, what I enjoyed a lot is that Julio showed us the reality of it, right? These rainforests. So I've not been to Colombia myself, though we've got a project there, but I've been to Peru and in the same Amazonia ecosystem. And it's amazing everything you can provide from the forest, you know, bees and honey, obviously, but sustainable tourism as well. And you can drive change, you can increase living conditions using the forest in a sustainable way. What we intend to do is to make sure that people remain in their forest and not travel to Bogota or to Lima or to other, you know, big cities to find jobs. They need to be able to find jobs in the forest thanks to all these value chains that we've been discussing about for the last hour. And you know, every time I see a forest like this, a rainforest, I mean, wow, I need to travel there again, because they are the most emblematic forest in the world. And once you've been there, you know why. You know why. They're so rich. And maybe one last word is what we've experienced here by, you know, walking in the forest is good, but we can also do that where we are. What I usually do is when I go in a forest, I stop and sit where I am, just to watch the forest, just to look at everything that happens, you know, just underneath my nose. And I can see, you know, life coming up. I can see death as well. And I can see that everything is interconnected. And forest teaches us that everything is linked. And yes, we can live in harmony with forest, and not only in the rainforests, but also where we are, in France, in Europe, in the world, whatever. Forests, they cover 30% of our land, and we depend on them, and Julio explained that very well. We can develop our business models, the way we live, using the forest in a sustainable way, big time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing. Well, I think Julio hasn't come back, but it was a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for taking us on a tour in the Amazon. Thank you very much. So we are now ready to move to our next panel. And I am happy to welcome Sarah Toumi and Richard Quest.
Good morning, can you hear me?
If we don't do it now, we will never have the opportunity to do it again. it's very easy to plant a tree, it's not easy to grow a tree. And that's what I learned in Tunisia, from just planting acacia trees into growing agroecological ecosystems with communities, creating value chains that sustain the ecosystem.
So, Richard and Sarah, welcome on this panel. I'm thrilled to have you with us today. I think this video was the best, actually, possible introduction about Sarah. Richard, you're CNN foremost international business correspondent and probably one of the most renowned faces for CNN internationally. Sarah, you've been a very successful eco-entrepreneur for over 15 years. The question I would like to ask you both, and maybe starting with Richard, is that, so biodiversity has been incorporated in international agenda for government and international organizations for over a decade now. Yet, most international partners regret the lack of projects on the ground. And on the other hand, you see this wealth of local initiatives who are very impactful, who have a hard time attracting visibility and capital. So what do you do about it? And Richard, maybe you can start.
Right, well, you see, you put your finger on it right at the beginning. You talked about international organizations and you talk about governments. But the missing link to all of this is the private sector. And it's the private sector where much of the money, the entrepreneurship, the initiative is going to come. A lot of, I mean, you know, so I was looking at the sort of project, you describe her as an eco-entrepreneur. And that's because there has to be a private sector involvement. If we are going to be serious about biodiversity, the SDGs, the future of ESG, you've got to bear in mind that the bulk of the work is going to be done in the private sector, because that is where manufacturing takes place, that is where consumerism is led, and it is the private sector that will ultimately take what governments and NGOs put in place. Now, look, I know to many people in the biodiversity world, the private sector can seem like a dirty word, and for good reason. The private sector has been responsible for many of the problems. But what we have discovered, certainly in Call to Earth, and certainly on Quest Means Business, what I am discovering is that bringing in the enlightened CEOs to play their role so that they provide the capital that Sarah will agree is crucial, then you start to make serious progress.
Thank you. Sarah, same questions for you. How do we make projects like yours more visible, and how helpful it is to find impactful solutions for biodiversity?
Well, how to make it visible? I think media has a big part in that job. I have the chance to to get a lot of mediatization, a lot of visibility in my career. I beginning at a very young age, so I was, some kind of a success story, and people like to talk about it, about this young lady fighting desertification in Africa. That's great, but the thing is, there are so many projects on the field that are not known, but they are struggling because they don't get access to opportunities. And this is actually a virtuous circle, because if you don't get access to visibility, you don't get access to opportunities, and you continue struggling until you decide to stop your action.
So what you're saying is that the role of storytelling in irrigating the political agenda is very important. How has that helped you as an entrepreneur in the fields?
Well, you know, I started as a very small entrepreneur with a 3,000 euros crowdfunding campaign. planting trees in Tunisia, planting acacia trees to grow Arabic gum with women farmers. But thanks to the media, thanks to the visibility I got access to many prizes, like the Rolex prize, like I was listed in the Forbes 30 and the 30 social entrepreneurs. That led me to get more fundings for my company. That led me to get access to contracts with big companies who were looking for products for my farms, and let it grow slowly to become really a success.
And Richard, I understand that you were very much part of the launch of CNN Global Initiative Call to Earth. So what decided you to give the voice to these small entrepreneurs who have, as Sarah, they have great projects, but mostly small scale. So what decided to give them a voice in the hope that this would reverse the tide?
Because as Sarah says, that's the key to it. In terms of the ecosystem that is going to make a difference, the media plays a crucial role. And at CNN, we very much, in cooperation with Rolex and Call to Earth, we have designed these series of reports along with, and the goal is simple. The goal is to showcase what people are doing. And then by showcasing what people are doing in an inspirational way, encouraging others with the hashtag Call to Earth to get involved too. And Sarah is absolutely right when she says it is, you start with the seed corn, if you like, the seed money, the early entrepreneurship money. You have the success that you have because it's a bloody good idea. And it's a bloody good idea. And let's face it, it's got to be that or it's not worth doing. And it's a successful idea, which has got community involvement. And then you bring in someone like CNN, which then sort of ramps it up and gives publicity and gives a promotion and exposure to it through things like Call to Earth with Rolex. And you build this up. But it does require partnership. It requires people to be on the same page. You don't have to agree, but you all have to have the same goal. And I think what's important, and I think, Sarah, I'd be interested to hear if you agree with me on this, that what you can't do is regard private capital as bad. You can't regard all companies as awful. You have to recognize that it is companies in many cases that have the tentacles and the resources to leverage what you are doing. And then with somebody like ourselves, CNN, you get a bigger, leverage, dreadful word, horrible word, but leverage is what it's about. And what Sarah has done, and done beautifully, if I may say, has leveraged her idea through the use of all these different mediums, opportunities, organizations.
We were talking earlier in the panel with Nicole Schwab, who joined us from the World Economic Forum, about the importance of international coalitions and partnerships to engage the private sector. And what was shared was that there's been a shift over the past decade about the way private companies engage on this topic. Is it something that you also see when you host CEO every week? Can you tell that they are now more engaged and sincerely engaged to preserve our planet?
Absolutely, totally. 100%. The CEO is engaged. Full stop, new paragraph. My concern now is whether the CEO, and we talk about this on Question Means Business nightly, my concern is whether the CEO, so engaged, is now diverted in that engagement. I'll give you an example. The pandemic, rightly so, is requiring vast amounts of CEO board time. Just rebuilding companies, rebuilding economies. And what I've been asking CEOs again and again and again is the SDGs and the environment, social and governance policies. I can see an argument that says, put them to one side at the moment. Let's not worry about the planet whilst we're just saving the company, saving the economy, saving lives. It's the old argument, lives versus livelihoods. I can reframe that. Planet versus livelihoods. Well, of course, the CEO says it's a false choice because you have to have both. Without one, you're not going to have the other. And what I would encourage people to do is hold companies to their commitments, which is what I do on a nightly basis, and say, okay, I understand you may have to change your targets. I understand you may have to shift your goals and deadlines. You've got to put the fire out. But if you're going to rebuild the new house, please give me your commitment that your SDGs and your ESG goals remain the same. And so far, whether they're just being polite, whether it's just lip service, I don't know. We'll find out.
I'm very happy to hear you say that, because I was wondering if you could pinpoint greenwashing when a CEO would come and pledge his commitments, and second, how you could actually use your voice to make them accountable, because many talk, but at the end of the day, impact is not quick enough on the ground. So
it's vinegar versus sugar, is what you're saying. You know, do you catch more flies with one versus the other? I think the problem with greenwashing, the real problem with greenwashing, is it's very hard to see. So you get dozens of reports and documents and this, all telling you what their commitments are. They're going to be carbon neutral, they'll be net neutral, they'll be this neutral. They keep changing the goalposts, by the way, so that you can't really understand. And then they're able to say, yes, we met the target. It's very difficult to tie that down. But we do our best. And I think what you really have to do is you have to put the CEO on the spot. You have to make the CEO, the chairman of the board of directors, you have to make them feel uncomfortable, that they're going to get asked a really nasty question that others, look, I'm an aviation geek. I'm an aviation expert in that sense. I am not in the weeds of net neutrality and carbon emissions, except in terms of carbon emissions trading. So I have to rely on other experts telling me, no, Big Corp lied. No, X Corp obfuscated. And if people like Sarah come up to me and say, do you know, we're being hoodwinked, we're being told a lie, or at least obfuscated by X, Y, Z, then I listen to it. I listen to it because, you know, I was listening to Greta the other day. I'm not sure that, you know, people to a certain extent know we are in a crisis. CEOs know we're in a crisis. They also know they've got to save their businesses. They know it's not a zero-sum game. It's not one, they're not mutually exclusive, but it's how we encourage, prod, annoy, shame, ridicule, how we use all the tools at our disposal to make sure companies do the right thing. I don't know one CEO that wakes up in the morning and says, you know, I'm going to pollute the planet. You know, I am going to shove huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the planet and I'll watch the trees die. No, they say, I can buy carbon credits here. I can delay investment on that over there. I will take advantage of that tax loophole over here. And what I have to do, my job, CNN's job, is to point out when we're being hoodwinked.
Thank you, Richard. Sarah, I would like to turn to you and to ask you about this mass mobilization for tree planting. Do you see it as an opportunity or as a danger if, you know, because it gets so much traction, but then you have many people in the field who don't really know what they're doing. So where is actually what is the right balance?
First of all, I have to say that we should not set a competition between those who are just planting trees and those who are trying to rebuild or regenerate ecosystems. We are all working for the same vision, which is about saving the planet and humanity. However, what is lacking currently is access to knowledge, access to scientists, expertise, people who have this knowledge, who know what to do, but who are not accessible for these project leaders. And why? Because mainly there is no funding for this kind of collaborations. And as Richard said, we need all the stakeholders around the table. And if we leave project leaders without access to knowledge, access to expertise, of course, we cannot expect that they will do exactly the good thing. And if we leave scientists alone in their offices, they will never be able to make a change on this planet. So it's about creating coalitions, like you're doing with Regenopolis, creating these coalitions where we have private sector, financial partners, scientists, project leaders, communities all around the table and saying, okay, this is a problem, how we're going to solve it with all the solutions we can bring on the table.
Thank you. And as an entrepreneur in Tunisia and more recently in your position at UNCCD, so you've been working a lot on the Great Green Wall. How do you think you can best help those entrepreneurs who started probably like you did a few years ago? What can you bring to the table to help them thrive and have an impact?
First of all, we can make them visible. Because when I have had this enormous chance to talk with high-level leaders of the planet about the Great Green Wall initiative and gathering a lot of money for this initiative. But when we spoke with them, what they say is, we would like to finance, but there is no projects on the ground. And this is ridiculous because there is so many small projects, so many project leaders, communities on the field, especially in the Great Green Wall. We are talking about 11 countries, about 300 million people. We cannot say there is no entrepreneurs there is no leaders who have great ideas. It's impossible. They are here, they are not visible. There is a lack also of opportunities because there is a problem of narrative. The narrative around Sahel is very bad, and people, investors especially, think it's too risky to invest in the Sahel. However, the Sahel is a hotspot for biodiversity and climate changes, and regeneration of ecosystems and preservation of biodiversity is actually a big opportunity to create jobs, to restore lands, and to sequestrate carbon. So it's a big opportunity for investors, but however, because of the lack of visibility, they don't know it yet, but maybe they will know it very soon.
Yeah. And thanks to Richard, who will showcase, hopefully, projects about the Great Green Wall in Call to Earth.
Let me just say, first of all, Sarah, I'm a huge admirer. And secondly, anybody who's got a good story for me, my email is richard.quest@cnn.com. richard.quest@warnermedia.com. Either of those addresses will work. richard.quest@warnermedia.com. If you've got a good story that you think I should know and follow, send it me.
Richard, thank you very much. And I'm sure you'll get tons of emails now that you've got with this. Sarah, thank you very much for sharing your story. I think it's very inspirational for a generation of eco-entrepreneurs and very helpful for all those projects that you're trying to support in so many different ways. So thank you very much for joining us today. Richard, thank you very much for your presence online. And I think that actually closes the session today. And I would like to thank all the panelists that we have. We had a great discussion. As I said in the introduction, to inform, to inspire, and to support projects. So I think we've managed to get all those 3 points. So thank you very much to all. What I would remember is definitely the need to change the mindset of people, to share a vision, to share a passion, and to inspire through storytelling, always sharing good examples. And the fact that there is a wealth of local initiative out there for reforestation, that more and more private companies are actually joining the movement, changing their practice, willing to shift their business models. So it's a very hopeful message that we got here today from the panel. So thank you very much to everyone here online and who attended in the audience. Thank you.